Have you ever noticed how a single word can linger inside you? For days, you might not remember what you had for breakfast yesterday, but you remember that cruel thing someone said to you years ago. Strange, isn't it? It didn't leave a bruise, it didn't draw blood, no bones were broken, and yet it hurt deeply. Words are invisible arrows. They fly unseen, faster than a blink, piercing through flesh and bone, hitting something far more delicate, the human heart. And what makes them so dangerous is that you don't always realize you've been struck until long after. You find yourself awake at night, replaying a careless insult, a harsh judgment, a bitter remark that cuts so cleanly you didn't even feel it at first, but it's there, and it changes you. In the ancient teachings of the Buddha, words are never just words. They are living things. Each one carries weight, power, and consequence. The Dhammapada, one of the oldest collections of the Buddha's sayings, warns us clearly. A harsh word spoken in anger wounds like an arrow. And it doesn't matter if it was spoken 1,000 years ago or this very morning. The nature of words hasn't changed. What was true in the forests of ancient India is just as true in the digital comment sections of today. We live in a world obsessed with speaking. Voices shout over one another, opinions thrown like daggers, criticism fired like bullets from a machine gun, and somewhere in that noise, someone bleeds quietly. Maybe it's you, maybe it's me, maybe it's someone you barely noticed today. The tragedy is, we rarely see the wounds we leave behind. You might have told a friend, "You'll never succeed," or snapped at your child, "Why can't you do anything right?" Perhaps you gossiped, mocked, or ridiculed someone just to entertain a crowd, and you moved on, but the words didn't. They sank into the tender soil of another human being's soul and planted a seed of pain. Sometimes that pain takes root. Sometimes it blooms into hatred, self-doubt, or despair. And sometimes it quietly kills a little piece of joy someone carried within them. The Buddha didn't condemn speech because it offends society's delicate sensibilities. He taught the dangers of harsh words because he understood the mechanics of the human mind. He knew that our words shape the landscapes of other people's inner worlds. They can uplift or they can destroy. Every phrase, every insult, every cruel joke is like a stone tossed into a still pond. The ripples spread further than you realize, and when those ripples collide, when enough angry voices drown out compassion, entire societies become fractured, families torn apart, and hearts hardened. But here's the thing no one tells you. The person who speaks with cruelty is also wounded. Harsh words don't fall from healthy hearts. They come from places of anger, fear, jealousy, and suffering. A person at peace doesn't spit venom. A mind rooted in kindness doesn't belittle. So when someone wounds you with words, what you're really witnessing is their pain spilling over. And when you wound others, it's your own restlessness escaping through your lips. The Buddha compared words to seeds. He urged us to plant those of wisdom, truth, and gentleness. Because everything you plant, you eventually harvest. If you scatter anger, it returns as loneliness. If you scatter insults, they return as sorrow. But if you plant kindness, even in barren soil, flowers will bloom. You see, we underestimate the value of gentle speech. We think it's weak, naive, or old-fashioned. But in truth, it's a mark of great strength. It takes no effort to curse, mock, or belittle. Any fool can do it, and many do, but to pause, to measure your words, to speak with clarity and compassion in the heat of conflict. That requires discipline. It demands wisdom. It reveals your character far more than titles, possessions, or public displays of virtue ever could. The ancient masters said, "Speech is the mirror of the heart. If your words are cruel, your heart is restless. If your words uplift, your heart is calm." And maybe that's where our work begins. not by policing others, not by silencing the loud and reckless, but by turning inward, by noticing the words we choose, the ones we speak aloud, and the ones we mutter silently to ourselves, because the harshest critic most of us will ever face lives in our own mind. How many times have you told yourself, "I'm not enough, I'm a failure, no one loves me"? And yet those are words too, invisible arrows fired into your own heart. If we are to heal the world, if we are to reduce the suffering around us, we must start with the language we use inside ourselves. Speak to yourself gently, forgive your stumbles, encourage your weary soul, because only those who are kind within can truly speak with kindness to others. There's an old story in the Buddhist texts. A man once approached the Buddha and hurled insults at him for hours. The Buddha sat in silence, unmoved. Finally, the man demanded, "Aren't you angry with me?" The Buddha replied, "If someone offers you a gift and you refuse it, to whom does the gift belong?" The man said, "To the one who offered it." Exactly, the Buddha smiled. "I refuse your insults. They are yours to keep." And so they are. Not every arrow needs to land. Not every word must be absorbed. When you learn this, when you truly understand the weight of your words and the freedom of not clinging to those hurled at you, a great peace arises. And from that peace, something beautiful happens. Your words become medicine. Your silence becomes wisdom. Your presence becomes a sanctuary for others. And in a world drowning in noise, that is a rare and precious thing. Stay with me, because there's something deeper we need to uncover. Not just the harm of words, but their cause. Why do cruel words escape our lips so easily? What dark root are they growing from? To find out, we must step beyond the surface, into the heart of anger, fear, and human suffering itself. Let's go there. If words are invisible arrows, then who taught us to fire them so carelessly? Why are we so quick to wound and so slow to heal? The answer lies in the ancient wisdom of a man who understood human suffering better than anyone who has ever walked this earth. A man who abandoned his throne, his wealth, and his crown to discover what truly poisons the human heart, the Buddha. And of all the dangers he warned us about: greed, hatred, delusion. One of the most quietly destructive was harsh speech. In the Kakavati Sutta, the Buddha spoke of how the downfall of entire societies begins not with war, but with the erosion of virtue in everyday speech. When people abandon kindness in conversation, when truth is traded for gossip, slander, and insult, when words are used as weapons instead of bridges, the fabric of community begins to unravel, and the damage is never isolated. A sharp word spoken today echoes into the future, altering destinies in ways we rarely recognize. The Buddha didn't issue empty, moralistic commands. He spoke from a place of deep understanding of how words shape minds, relationships, and the very energy of the spaces we inhabit. He once said, "Speak only what is true, speak what is kind, speak what is beneficial, speak at the right time." A simple teaching, but how many of us actually live by it? We rush to speak, we snap in anger, we lash out when threatened, and far too often we confuse bluntness for honesty and cruelty for strength. But what the Buddha knew, and what modern psychology now confirms, is that words spoken in anger never truly serve truth. They serve ego, they serve fear, they serve the restless, untrained mind seeking dominance over another. One evening, as recorded in the Vinaya Pitaka, a disciple approached the Buddha, frustrated by how people spoke to him. "Master," he asked, "how should we respond when insulted, mocked, or cursed?" And the Buddha replied with a powerful image. "If someone offers you a filthy rag and you do not accept it, to whom does it belong?" "To the one who offered it," the disciple answered. "Then so it is with harsh words," the Buddha said. If you do not accept them, they remain with the speaker. But he didn't stop there. He warned that even thinking cruel words, even whispering them to ourselves in moments of private anger, sows the same karmic seeds as speaking them aloud. Because in the mind's garden, thoughts are as potent as speech, and left unchecked, they blossom into suffering. You see, to the Buddha, words are not mere sound. They are expressions of our inner world. What leaves your mouth reveals what festers or flourishes within you. A mouth that spits venom belongs to a heart plagued by turmoil. A tongue that wounds belongs to a mind drowning in ignorance. And so he urged his followers, guard your speech as a warrior guards the gates of a fortress, not out of fear, not to suppress oneself, but to liberate oneself, because every harsh word spoken binds you further to the wheel of suffering, and every kind word spoken weakens the chains. The Buddha also understood the power of silence. He taught that when words carry no truth, no benefit, no kindness, silence is the noblest response. He called it noble silence, not an awkward avoidance, but a powerful act of compassion, a refusal to add another ripple of harm to the world. In the Anguttara Nikaya, he said, if a word brings harm, avoid it. If a word brings peace, speak it. Imagine how different our world would be if even a fraction of us practiced this. If online debates ended in thoughtful silence instead of escalating cruelty. If arguments in homes paused with a breath, a mindful word, or none at all. Because silence too can be a gift, a shield, a balm. And yet the Buddha was no fool. He knew there would be times when difficult truths needed speaking, when injustice demanded a voice, when compassion meant saying what others refused to. But even then, the timing, the tone, and the intention behind those words mattered. Is it to humiliate, or to heal, to dominate, or to enlighten? The Buddha taught that wise speech doesn't mean avoiding difficult conversations. It means approaching them with mindfulness, courage, and compassion. He offered a simple test, a kind of inner checkpoint before speaking. Is it true? Is it kind? Is it beneficial? Is it timely? If any answer is no, the words are best left unspoken. We might believe this is too idealistic for modern life. That in a world of politics, business, and conflict, sharp tongues are necessary weapons. But the Buddha would gently remind us weapons can cut both ways, and no one escapes unharmed. In the end, harsh speech is not about what it does to others. It's about what it reveals in us, and what it leaves behind in our wake. A single insult can ignite 100 conflicts. A cruel joke can plant the seed of a stranger's despair. An angry word can fracture the soul of a loved one. But a kind word, a word of truth spoken with compassion, can save a life, perhaps even your own. This is why the Buddha's warnings on speech fill page after page of the ancient texts, because he knew the mouth is the gateway to both harm and healing. And until we master it, we remain trapped in cycles of conflict, both within and without. And so, we stand here now, in a world much louder than his, but no less wounded by words. What will we do with this wisdom? How will we speak? Today, but before we can speak wisely, we must understand what fuels the harshness within us, what ancient forces stir the tongue to lash out. And for that, we must descend into the shadowed heart of anger and ego, not to fear it, but to see it clearly, because only what is seen can be transformed. Let's go deeper. It's easy to blame the world for the sharpness of our tongues. We tell ourselves, they started it. They deserved it. Or worse, I was just being honest. But beneath every harsh word we speak lies a deeper truth, one most of us are too afraid to face. We don't speak cruelly because the world is cruel. We speak cruelly because we are suffering. Yes, suffering. It's a word we rarely use in everyday conversation. But the Buddha taught that every unkind word, every cutting remark, is the symptom of a mind in turmoil. Think about it. Have you ever seen a truly peaceful, contented person go out of their way to humiliate someone else, to insult a stranger, to wound a loved one with words designed to hurt? No, because when the heart is at peace, the mouth follows, and when the heart is restless, wounded, consumed by fear or anger, the tongue becomes a weapon. The Buddha pointed to the root causes of harsh speech: anger, jealousy, pride, insecurity, ignorance. Not outside forces, not other people's flaws, but the storms within our own minds. He described it as being like a man holding a hot coal, with the intention of throwing it at someone else. But as he holds it, he is the one getting burned. This is what cruel words do. They scorch the speaker long before they wound the listener. And yet, we do it anyway. Why? Because harsh words offer us the illusion of control. For a fleeting moment when we insult, belittle, or criticize, we feel powerful. We feel taller as we make others smaller. We feel heard as we drown out another's voice. But it's a shallow, temporary relief, a cheap high that leaves a deeper emptiness behind. The Buddha called this asava, the taints or intoxications of the mind. These are subtle, corrosive forces, craving, ill will, and ignorance. And every time we speak with cruelty, we feed those forces. It begins so small. A harsh joke at someone's expense, a sarcastic remark meant to sting, an angry text fired off without thinking, and like drops of poison in a well. These small acts of verbal violence slowly darken our hearts, until one day, our words become habits, our habits become character, and our character becomes suffering. But here's the truth the Buddha wanted us to realize. The people we hurt the most with our words are often the people we claim to love. Why? Because those closest to us reflect our deepest wounds. They trigger our unresolved anger, our buried fears, our ancient insecurities. So when your partner forgets something important and you lash out, it's not about them. It's about the story your ego tells you in that moment. I'm not important. I'm invisible. They don't respect me. And instead of facing that wound, we attack. The Buddha urged us to pause and look inward in these moments, to ask ourselves, what am I truly reacting to? What old pain is this stirring in me? What am I trying to protect? Because the harsh words we speak are never about the person in front of us. They are echoes of the past, echoes of old humiliations, betrayals, disappointments that we carry like invisible scars. And unless we heal those inner wounds, our words will continue to harm, not because we are bad people, but because we are unhealed people. The Buddha wasn't interested in shaming us for these moments. He understood that all of us are carrying invisible burdens. He taught with compassion because he knew an untrained mind is a dangerous place to live. It whispers lies. It feeds resentments. It magnifies slights. And it uses words as weapons in its endless war for validation. But here's the hope hidden inside that truth. If the cause of our cruel words is internal, then so is the cure. We don't need to silence the world to find peace. We need to silence the storm within. The Buddha offered a path, a way to untangle the roots of our verbal violence: mindfulness, loving kindness, compassion, and self-inquiry. When we bring awareness to the moment before we speak, when we feel the heat rising in our chest, the sharpness in our throat, and we pause, we create space, and in that space, we reclaim our freedom. One of the Buddha's most powerful teachings was this: whatever is not yours, abandon it. Anger is not yours. Hatred is not yours. Cruelty is not yours. They are visitors, not your nature. And the more we see them for what they are, passing clouds in the vast sky of our consciousness, the less power they hold over us. The harsh word unspoken is not a weakness, it's a victory, a small, silent act of liberation. And over time, these small acts accumulate. They reshape our character, they soften the heart, they cleanse the mind, until one day words of cruelty feel foreign to us, not because we're forcing kindness, but because peace has taken root where pain once lived. So the next time your tongue sharpens and your ego rises, pause, ask yourself, is this about them or about something inside me? Most often, it's the latter, and in that awareness lies your power, because every cruel word withheld, every harsh thought left to dissolve, is a step out of suffering, and a step toward the kind of peace the Buddha spoke of, not a peace dependent on the world being kind, but a peace forged in the quiet mastery of your own heart. And when we understand this, when we see the true cause behind cruel words, a new question arises. If the tongue can be a weapon, can it also be a healer? Can words not only stop harm, but mend the wounds they've left behind? The answer is where we'll go next. Let's keep walking. Some wounds are easy to see. A bruise, a broken bone, a scar on the skin, but the wounds left by words, those are invisible, and in many ways far more dangerous, because what we cannot see, we often fail to heal, and what remains unhealed shapes us in ways we don't even realize. You see, when a harsh word is spoken, it doesn't simply vanish into the air. It sinks into the heart. It lodges itself in the mind like a thorn, and sometimes it stays there for years. A single cruel sentence, a single humiliating remark, a careless insult flung in anger. It can echo in someone's mind for decades. We carry these words like ghosts, whispers that follow us into adulthood, echoes we hear in our moments of doubt. You're worthless. You'll never be good enough. No one will ever love you. Words we thought we'd forgotten, until life presses against an old wound, and suddenly it hurts again. The Buddha understood this long before modern psychology gave it a name. He taught that verbal harm leaves samskara, mental imprints, deep grooves in the consciousness. And over time, these grooves shape how we see ourselves, how we relate to others, and how we experience the world. It's no accident that the kindest people you'll ever meet are often those who have suffered most from cruel words. They know too well the invisible scars words can leave, and they vow never to be the source of that kind of pain for someone else. But here's the hard truth. Most of us, at some point, have been both the wounded and the wounder. We've all been on the receiving end of harsh language, and if we're honest, we've all sent arrows flying from our own mouths. Why? Because hurt people hurt people. When a heart is carrying the weight of invisible scars, it looks for relief. And sometimes the quickest, though cruelest way, is to pass that pain on to others. A sharp remark, a mocking comment, a dismissive tone. We trade one invisible scar for another, but the Buddha taught a different path. He reminded us that just because we have been wounded by words, we do not have to become the wielder of those same weapons. He spoke of ahimsa, nonviolence in thought, word, and deed, because the violence of language, though unseen, can poison a heart faster than any blade. Think of the words you carry from your own past. Who spoke them? When did they strike? What story did they plant inside you? Maybe it was a teacher who said you'd never succeed, a parent who made you feel unworthy, a friend who betrayed you with a careless insult. And though the moment passed, the words stayed, like invisible ink. They wrote stories on the walls of your mind, and even now those stories color the way you live. You avoid risks because of that voice saying, "You'll fail." You push people away because of that whisper, "You're unlovable." You chase perfection because of the old lie, "You're never enough." The Buddha's wisdom was clear. What you think you become, what you feel you attract, what you imagine you create. And if harsh words plant seeds of fear, anger, and unworthiness, then it's no surprise when we harvest lives filled with suffering. But it doesn't have to be this way, because words, while powerful enough to wound, are also powerful enough to heal. A single phrase of genuine kindness can erase years of quiet agony. A heartfelt apology can lift the weight of old grief. A word of encouragement can dissolve the shackles of doubt. And just as cruel words leave scars, gentle words plant blossoms in the heart. The Buddha urged us to become aware of the invisible wounds we and others carry, not to wallow in them, not to resent those who left them, but to see them with clarity, because only when you see the wound can you tend to it. He taught that compassion must begin with ourselves, to forgive the one who hurt you, yes, but first, to forgive the one inside you still holding on to the pain. To whisper gently to yourself, that was not your fault. You are worthy. You are not the words they gave you. And in doing so, you begin to soften those scars, to lighten the heavy stories you've carried for too long. But the Buddha didn't stop there. He called us to extend this awareness to others, to remember that behind every act of cruelty, there is a history of invisible wounds. That sharp-tongued colleague, perhaps he was once a boy shamed by a father's anger. That bitter woman at the market, perhaps she carries a lifetime of betrayal. That stranger who insults you online, perhaps their heart is a battlefield you cannot see. This isn't to excuse cruelty, but to understand it, because only through understanding can we choose a different path. And this is the deeper power of language, not just to describe our world, but to shape it. Every word you speak adds to the weight or the lightness of someone's life. Your words can build bridges where walls once stood. They can open a window in a mind clouded by sorrow. They can remind a forgotten heart of its own worth. Lord, they can deepen wounds. The choice is yours in every conversation, in every moment of frustration, in every casual remark. This is the path the Buddha offered, a path of conscious speech, a path of words chosen with care, a path where language becomes a tool for healing, not harm. And though it is not always easy, it is always possible, because while we may not control the words that once wounded us, we hold complete power over the words we speak today. And perhaps, in learning to speak gently to ourselves and to those around us, we'll discover something unexpected, that the heart too can heal, that scars, no matter how old, can soften, and that kindness spoken softly, given freely, can reshape a life, even our own. So as we continue on this path, let us ask ourselves, if words can leave scars, what kind of marks do I wish to leave behind? And in seeking that answer, we step into the next chapter of this journey, a chapter not about the wounds words leave, but about the healing they can offer. Let's keep walking. It's easy to open your mouth. It's much harder to speak wisely. Most people speak to be heard. Few speak to bring peace. And rarer still is the one whose words heal, uplift, and enlighten. The Buddha once said, "Better than 1,000 hollow words is one word that brings peace." But how often do we pause before speaking? How often do we ask ourselves, is this necessary? Is this kind? Is this true? The sages of old understood that language is not just sound. It is a tool, a weapon, a balm. And those who mastered the art of speech were not the loudest in the room, but the ones whose words lingered long after they were spoken. So what does it mean to speak like a sage? It begins with restraint, not silence born from fear, but silence born from wisdom. The sage knows that not every thought deserves a voice, not every impulse should become a word. They listen deeply, not just to what is said, but to what remains unsaid. They hear the sorrow behind the anger, the insecurity behind the boasting, the longing behind the complaint, and because they listen, they speak differently. Their words are measured, not hurried, not flung out like careless arrows. They speak with intention, every word chosen like a stone placed in a sacred garden. And when they do speak, their words carry weight, not because they shout, but because they don't. In a world addicted to noise, stillness is power. The sage speaks softly, and yet their voice echoes deeper than any raised one, because it comes not from the throat, but from the heart. There's an old saying in Zen, speak only if it improves upon the silence. How different our lives would be if we lived by that. If before each word left our lips, we asked, will this heal or harm? Will this uplift or burden? Is this rooted in wisdom or in ego? And most importantly, is this necessary? The sage understands the economy of language. They don't waste words. They don't decorate truth with needless embellishments. They don't gossip, complain, or boast. When they praise, it is sincere. When they correct, it is gentle. When they console, it is from presence, not platitude. But make no mistake, to speak like a sage is not to speak without passion. It's to speak with clarity, with a voice free of malice, unclouded by pride, and rooted in understanding. The sage knows when a single sentence can change a heart. They know when silence says more than words ever could. And they know that timing is everything. A wise word spoken too soon can fall on deaf ears. A truth shouted in anger loses its medicine, but the right word at the right moment in the right tone, that is a kind of alchemy. It transforms. The Buddha spoke often of the 4 types of speech. A wise person practices truthful speech, words that are honest, free of deceit or exaggeration; kind speech, words spoken with compassion, avoiding cruelty and harshness; beneficial speech, words that serve a higher purpose, uplifting or guiding the listener; timely speech, words offered at the right moment when they can truly be received. He urged us to hold every word against these measures, and if it failed to meet them, to let it remain unspoken, not from repression, but from care, because the sage knows every word shapes karma. What you speak today becomes the world you live in tomorrow. You can wound with your tongue, or heal. You can create division, or unity. You can scatter confusion, or offer clarity. Words are not small things, they are acts. To practice this art is not to become perfect overnight. We all stumble. Even the great teachers sometimes misspeak, but the sage cultivates awareness. They notice when anger rises. They feel the pull of the ego wanting to be clever, to be right, to be heard. And in that noticing, they pause, a breath, a moment of space, a return to presence, because it's in the space between impulse and action where wisdom lives. The Buddha called this the practice of right speech, one of the noble eightfold path's pillars. It isn't about being politically correct. It's about being spiritually sincere. Not speaking to manipulate, not speaking to impress, not speaking to defend the fragile ego, but speaking as an offering, as a service, as a reflection of the peace within. The most beautiful thing is, this is a skill anyone can cultivate. You don't need a monastery. You don't need robes or titles. You need attention, humility, and the courage to let silence speak for you when it says more than your words could. Practice speaking less and listening more when you do speak. Let it be from your center, not your wounds. Speak to understand, not to win. Speak to connect, not to impress. And watch how your world begins to change. You'll find that people lean in closer when you say less, that your words carry more gravity. When they are rare and sincere, that heart's open. When you speak with kindness and patience, and most importantly, you'll notice a lightness in yourself, the absence of regret for words you didn't mean, the absence of guilt for words said in anger, the quiet pride of knowing your voice is a vessel for peace. This is the way of the sage. a path not marked by silence alone, but by the discipline to speak when it matters, and the grace to remain quiet when it doesn't. It's an art, a devotion, a lifelong practice. And each time you catch yourself, before a careless word escapes, each time you choose kindness over sarcasm, clarity over confusion, truth over convenience, you walk a little closer to wisdom. And as we continue this journey, let's step into a space even deeper. For now that we know the power of words and the wisdom of restraint, what happens when words themselves become medicine, not merely avoiding harm, but actively healing the unseen wounds we encounter daily? There's a way to speak that doesn't just prevent suffering, but dissolves it, and it's waiting for us just beyond this next chapter, shall we? There's a kind of wisdom that can't be spoken, a truth so vast, so profound, that words can only circle it like moths around a flame. And sometimes, the greatest act of compassion is to say nothing at all. We live in a world obsessed with noise. Words fill every moment. Phones buzz. Conversations compete for attention. The news shouts. And our own thoughts, they rarely stop speaking. We fill every pause, every silence, as if quiet were some kind of failure. But the sages, they understood something we've almost forgotten. That silence isn't emptiness. It's a living, breathing presence. A space where clarity is born, where wounds begin to close, where the soul can finally exhale. The Buddha often withdrew into the forest, not to escape the world, but to listen to it more deeply. He taught that mindfulness begins, not with words, but with awareness. To be mindful is not to be endlessly narrating your life to yourself. It's to feel the warmth of sunlight on your skin, to notice the sound of a bird's wings cutting through air, to observe the rising and falling of your breath, without the need to label it good or bad. Mindfulness is silence inside, the kind that lets you hear the world as it truly is, not as you imagine it. And when you carry this kind of presence, your words, when they come, are different. They no longer serve your ego. They serve truth. They no longer rush to fill the air. They rise only when needed, like a single candle in a dark room. You see, most people speak reactively. They respond to triggers, to fears, to the need to be right, without pausing to ask, is this useful? Is this kind? Is this true? But the mindful person lives in the pause, in the precious gap between what happens and how they choose to meet it. In that space, they find freedom, and often, they choose silence, not out of indifference, but out of deep care, because silence is not withdrawal. It's a powerful form of communication. The silent presence of a friend when your heart is broken can say more than 1,000 empty comforts. The quiet of a teacher before delivering a lesson can command more attention than shouting ever could. The stillness within yourself can dissolve anger before it takes form. The ancients spoke of noble silence, not just the absence of speech, but a silence filled with awareness, compassion, and restraint. The Buddha practiced it. He encouraged his disciples to observe it, because in that silence, the mind reveals its true nature, and you begin to see how often our words arise from fear, from pride, from habit. You notice the impulse to correct, to impress, to retaliate, and you learn. You don't have to obey it. You can let the thought rise, watch it, smile at it, and let it pass. This is mindfulness, not the suppression of speech, but the awareness of its roots. And when you master this, your silence becomes a sanctuary, a refuge for yourself and for others. People will feel it. They'll sense the peace in your presence. That here is someone who doesn't speak to be heard, but speaks when it truly matters, and sometimes chooses not to speak at all. The Zen masters tell stories of disciples traveling for days to ask a single question, and the master would simply hold up a finger, or smile, or remain still, and in that gesture, Everything was said, because wisdom isn't always taught in words. It's often transmitted in presence. And in those moments of shared silence, the student realizes the answers they sought were already within them. There's a kind of healing that can only happen in silence. The grieving don't need advice. The anxious don't need lectures. The lonely don't need pity. They need presence. They need you to sit beside them, without fixing, without judging, without filling the space, to simply be, to let your stillness be a mirror for their own. And when you can offer this, you become rare. In a world of endless noise, the one who carries silence is a balm, but this isn't easy. The mind loves to chatter. It wants to narrate, comment, predict, defend. And it fears the void that silence brings, because in silence, we meet ourselves. We notice the restless undercurrent, the old wounds, the longing for approval, the discomfort we avoid by speaking. But it's in facing these things that true freedom is born, when you can sit in silence with yourself, without reaching for distraction, without judging your thoughts, without needing to perform. You touch a kind of peace that no amount of words can offer. And from that peace, when you do choose to speak, your words carry power because they are not driven by impulse. They are guided by awareness. They land softly, like a feather on water, or firmly, like a stone on a path, but always with clarity, always with care. This is the way of mindfulness, the power of silence, not as absence, but as presence, not as retreat, but as mastery, to know when to speak and when to hold the space, to let your stillness say what words cannot. And in doing so, you become a refuge for others, a person whose presence soothes, whose quiet steadies the room, whose words, when they finally come, are like a lantern in the dark. As we continue this path, there's something even more extraordinary waiting for us. For words, when rooted in mindfulness, can become more than speech. They can become medicine, not merely avoiding harm, but actively healing. There's a way to speak that dissolves fear, anger, and sorrow, a kind of verbal alchemy that transforms the unseen wounds of the heart. And it's time we stepped into that space. Let's walk together into the next chapter and discover how kindness, spoken at the right moment, can change not just a conversation, but a life. There's something ancient, almost sacred, about the way humans tell stories. Before temples were built, before scriptures were written, before any word was etched in stone, there was a circle of people sitting around a fire, sharing stories, stories of loss, of courage, of betrayal, of love. And in those stories, wounds began to heal. The Buddha understood this. He didn't lecture in abstractions. He spoke through parables, fables, and metaphors. A wayward son, a burning house, a man pierced by a poisoned arrow. Each story was a mirror, not to entertain, but to awaken. Because storytelling isn't just about passing time. It's a medicine, a bridge between heart and mind, a balm for the unseen wounds we carry. When someone tells you a story, they aren't just giving you facts. They're inviting you into a world, a place where your defenses soften, where your judgments pause, where, for a moment, you feel less alone. Think about it. When has a piece of advice ever truly changed you? When someone said, "Just let it go." Did you? But when you heard the story of the two monks carrying a woman across a river, and how one let go of the burden long before the other, something inside you shifted. Because a story isn't a demand, it's a gentle offering, a truth wrapped in tenderness. And in a world where harsh words wound like arrows, stories can heal like rain. On parched earth, the ancients called it Dharma storytelling, a way to reveal deeper truths, without force, to guide a restless heart back to stillness. A father loses his child. He comes to the Buddha drowning in grief. He begs for a cure, a miracle, a way to undo fate. The Buddha doesn't scold him, doesn't offer platitudes. He asks the man to bring a handful of mustard seeds. From a home untouched by death, the man searches every house in the village, and at each door, he hears stories of loss, of mothers, fathers, daughters, sons, and by the time he returns, he understands no sermon could have done that, only the story he gathered for himself. When we tell our stories, we aren't just remembering, we're stitching ourselves back together. The wounds left by cruel words, the invisible scars of shame and silence, they begin to fade. When shared in a safe space, a story is a confession, without punishment, of vulnerability, without humiliation, and when others hear it, they see themselves, they whisper, "I thought I was the only one." And in that shared recognition, healing begins. Modern psychology has finally caught up to what sages have known for centuries: narrative therapy, trauma writing, healing circles, because to give voice to your pain is to loosen its grip. But not all storytelling is healing. Some stories keep us stuck, the ones where we're always the victim, where others are villains, where we tell ourselves we're unworthy, unlovable, broken. These are the stories that need rewriting. And mindfulness, as we spoke of before, teaches us to see those stories clearly, to ask, is this narrative still serving me? Because the stories you carry become the life you live. If you tell yourself, "I'm cursed, no one respects me, the world is cruel," your mind will gather proof. But if you begin to weave a new story, one of resilience, of growth, of quiet strength, your heart begins to believe it, and slowly, your world changes. The Buddha spoke of this when he taught that with our thoughts we make the world. And what are thoughts but stories we tell ourselves over and over until they become real? So the invitation here is twofold. Tell your stories and choose them wisely, not to erase pain, not to pretend life is perfect, but to honor your journey, to find meaning in the middle of sorrow, to name your fears and watch them lose power. And just as important, become a listener. The greatest healers are those who can hold another's story without fixing it, without hijacking it with their own, without judgment, to simply say, "I hear you, I see you," because sometimes that's all a wounded heart needs. Remember, the harsh word wounds like an arrow, but a kind story can be the hand that pulls it out. You don't have to be a poet or a monk or a speaker before thousands. You only need to speak from where it hurts and from where it has healed, to let your story be a lantern for someone still walking through their darkness. And in doing so, you light your own path too. The sages knew this, that the shortest distance between a wound and its healing is often a story. So tell yours and listen to others, not to control the ending, but to witness the quiet miracle of two souls meeting in truth. And as we move forward, there's one more vital key to wielding words with wisdom, not just how to heal with stories, but how to protect yourself from the words of others, to learn the ancient art of not taking every arrow to heart. Because while we cannot stop cruel words from being spoken, we can learn how to let them pass through us, like wind through a tree, and that is where freedom begins. It's easy to speak of kindness when the world is gentle, when words land softly, when people are kind, when everything goes our way. But the real test of a heart's wisdom is not how it responds to tenderness, it's how it responds to cruelty. Anger, it rises like a storm, fast, hot, blinding. A harsh word cuts through you, a betrayal stings, a stranger's insult pierces deeper than expected, and before you even realize it, your chest tightens, your fists clench, and sharp words gather on your tongue, ready to strike back. It's instinctual, it's ancient, a defense mechanism, etched into our nervous systems, long before temples and mantras were ever spoken. But the Buddha taught, if we don't learn to master anger, it masters us. It becomes the arrow we not only fire at others, but one we drive deeper into ourselves. There's a story from the old texts. A young monk new to the monastery was constantly mocked by a fellow practitioner. Insults about his past, his appearance, his worth. Every day, cruel words were flung like stones. One evening, the young monk approached the Buddha, his face red with rage. "Master," he cried, "I cannot bear it. Why should I endure his venom without reply? Should I not defend myself? Should I not return his cruelty?" The Buddha smiled gently and asked, "If someone offers you a gift and you refuse it, to whom does the gift belong?" The young monk thought for a moment. "To the one who offered it," he replied. "Then why," the Buddha continued, "would you accept the gift of his anger?" This is where transformation begins. Anger isn't an enemy to be destroyed. It's a messenger, a signal, a fire. And fire, when uncontrolled, burns everything it touches. But when tended to carefully, it gives warmth, cooks food, lights the night. The same energy that fuels anger can fuel compassion, but how? First, recognize it, don't deny it. Don't dress it up in polite words. Don't pretend you're not hurt. Feel the heat rise in your chest. Name it. This is anger, this is pain. Because in naming it, you step back just enough to stop it from owning you. Then listen to what it's telling you. Anger always masks something deeper: fear of being unworthy, fear of being unloved, a sense of injustice, an old wound reopened. Ask yourself, what am I really angry about? What old hurt has this touched? And suddenly, you realize the person before you is not the true source of your pain. They're merely the spark. The kindling was already inside you. Next, choose how to respond. The old reaction is easy: lash out. Fire words sharper than theirs. Prove your power through volume or venom. But there's another way, a quieter, harder, infinitely more powerful way. Transform it. The Buddha taught that when anger arises, we can meet it with metta, loving kindness. Not forced, not fake, but a simple wish. May I be free from this suffering. May they be free from their suffering. Because cruelty never comes from a peaceful heart. Only the deeply wounded wound others. This isn't weakness. It's fierce compassion, the courage to break the chain of harm. Where it stands, a great teacher once said, holding onto anger is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. And every time we indulge in anger, we hurt ourselves first. Our heart tightens, our mind darkens. We carry them with us long after they've moved on. But when we offer kindness, even if only silently, within ourselves, we loosen that grip. We remind ourselves that no one else controls our peace. This doesn't mean you must be passive, or allow injustice to continue, or pretend words don't hurt. It means choosing your response consciously, speaking with clarity, not cruelty, defending your dignity without destroying another's. In moments of heat, practice the pause, one breath, one heartbeat, a single step away from the fire. In that pause lives freedom. And if words must be spoken, let them be like cool water, not oil on the flame. You'll find that people don't expect this. They expect retaliation. And when met with calm, some will disarm, others may double down. But you will remain free, because the true victory is not in silencing them, but in not allowing them to disturb your own peace. There's a teaching: hatred is never appeased by hatred. By non-hatred alone is hatred appeased. This isn't poetic idealism. It's practical wisdom. Because when you respond to anger with anger, it multiplies. But when you meet it with kindness, it often dies of starvation. I won't pretend it's easy. It takes practice, falling, failing, remembering, forgetting. But every moment is a chance to begin again, to pause, to breathe, to choose, and over time, what once burned like wildfire becomes a gentle warmth within you. The world will still fling its arrows, words will still cut, people will still misunderstand, but you'll have learned the art of transmutation, turning poison into medicine, turning harshness into wisdom, turning anger into kindness. And as you begin to live this way, you'll notice something miraculous. Your presence changes rooms, your calm becomes contagious. The sharpness of others softens around you, not because you demand it, but because your inner peace leaves no soil for their anger to take root. This is the quiet power of kindness, not naive, not weak, but born from wisdom and steady self-awareness. And as we continue, there's another ancient lesson to be reclaimed. If words can wound, if words can heal, if anger can be transformed into kindness, then surely there is wisdom in mastering how and when to speak it all, because sometimes the deepest wisdom is found not in words, but in the spaces between them. And that is the art of sacred silence. Every word you speak is a seed, and like all seeds, it carries within it the potential to bloom into something beautiful or something poisonous. We tend to think of karma as some distant force, a cosmic scale that balances good and evil in secret, measured by the unseen hands of fate. But karma is not fate, it is choice, it is action, and nowhere is it more immediate, more intimate than in the words we speak. The Buddha was clear about this. Speech is not a neutral act, it carries karmic weight. Every word we release into the world sets something in motion within ourselves, within those who hear it, and within the fabric of reality itself. A single word of kindness can save a life. A single word of cruelty can destroy one. Not metaphorically, literally. How many lives have been turned by a teacher's encouragement, a lover's betrayal, a stranger's insult, a parent's blessing? Words plant themselves deep within the soil of the heart, and what grows from them is a karma we will, without fail, one day harvest. In Buddhist teaching, there are 4 types of unwholesome speech that generate heavy karmic consequence: false speech, harsh speech, divisive speech, and idle gossip. Each of them might seem minor in the moment: a casual lie to avoid trouble, a sharp insult spoken in anger, a rumor whispered behind someone's back, empty words spoken just to fill silence. But none of these vanish. They echo, they shape, they bind, not because of some external judgment, but because each word reinforces the habits of our own heart. When you speak with cruelty, you train yourself to harden. You make it easier to do so again. And in time, your world bends to reflect your inner state. This is the law of cause and effect. Karma means action, and speech is action, of the most subtle and yet powerful kind. Consider this: a word spoken in anger may last seconds on your lips, but it might burn for years in another's memory. The karmic result isn't just in what happens to them. It lives in you too. It shapes how you see yourself. It chains you to that version of the person who spoke those words. And unless we become conscious, unless we choose to unlearn, we continue to live out that role. But karma isn't only punishment, it's opportunity. For every harsh word, there can be a healing one. For every careless insult, there can be a blessing. And as soon as you recognize the power in your voice, you can begin to reshape your karma. Right now, in this very breath, there's an old story. A man overcome with anger once insulted a great monk. His words were cruel, sharp, unrelenting. The monk, however, remained silent. He neither retaliated nor showed offense. Days later, guilt gnawed at the man's heart. He approached the monk and asked for forgiveness. The monk smiled gently and said, When you gave me your anger, I did not accept it. It remains with you still, and you alone must tend to its fruit." The man wept, for in those words he realized he had planted suffering, not in the monk's heart, but in his own. This is the subtlety of speech. When you curse someone, the first to be poisoned is you. When you lie, the first to fracture is your own integrity. When you gossip, you stain not their reputation, but your own. And likewise, when you speak with wisdom, the first to be illuminated is yourself. When you bless another, you cleanse your own heart. When you tell the truth, you free yourself. Every word is a karma seed, but unlike actions of body, which often require time, effort, or tools, speech is immediate, and in its immediacy, we have countless chances each day to either bind ourselves deeper or untangle the knots. This is why the Buddha placed such emphasis on right speech as one of the Noble Eightfold Path's core elements. It is not a minor virtue. It is a foundation, a path in itself to speak truthfully, to speak kindly, to speak in ways that unite rather than divide, and to refrain from idle, pointless chatter. These aren't mere moral guidelines. They are karmic technologies, tools for liberation, because when you master your speech, you master your mind, and when you master your mind, the chains of suffering begin to loosen. In this life, you will be tempted. Words will rise to your lips. In moments of anger, jealousy, or pride, some of them will feel so justified, so satisfying to release. But consider, what karma are you sowing? With each syllable, what world are you creating? With your voice, every conversation, every comment, every casual remark carries weight, not because others are watching, not because a God is judging, but because you are shaping the landscape of your own heart. And whether that landscape becomes a garden of peace or a battlefield of bitterness is decided, in no small part, by the words you choose. It's a profound power, disguised in ordinary moments, and it's yours right now. As we draw near the end of this reflection, one truth becomes undeniable. If words can wound, if words can heal, if anger can be transformed into kindness, and if every word plants karma within the soil of our lives, then surely the highest wisdom lies, not just in mastering what we say, but in knowing when to say nothing at all. In the silence between words is a deeper voice, a wisdom the wise have always known, a stillness from which all compassion, all clarity, and all true power arise. And so, in our final chapter, we'll step beyond speech itself, into that sacred, ancient quiet, where the wisest words were never spoken. And so, here we are, at the end of this quiet journey, through arrows of words, the unseen wounds they leave, and the deep wisdom the ancients knew, long before we gave it names. In every chapter, we've uncovered one simple, profound truth. Your words matter, not just in their sound, not just in how others hear them, but in what they leave behind, in how they shape you, in how they echo long after the moment has passed. We live in a world today saturated with noise. Opinions fly like arrows. Sarcasm is currency. Outrage is a performance. And amid all this clamor, the wisdom of the Buddha's teaching feels more necessary than ever. Speak only what is true. Speak only what is kind. Speak only what brings peace. Not because it's easy, not because it earns applause, but because it transforms the speaker as much as it heals the listener. Imagine for a moment a life where your words leave no scars, where your presence calms the room, where conversations with you feel like sanctuary, not combat, where those you meet walk away lighter, never heavier. That life isn't a fantasy, it's a discipline, a vow we can make. In each ordinary moment, there's a saying, From the Dhammapada, better than 1,000 hollow words is one word that brings peace. You don't have to be a monk. You don't need a monastery. You need only the courage to pause before you speak, to ask yourself, is this true? Is this kind? Is this necessary? And if it is, to choose silence instead. Silence too is speech. It's the speech of restraint, of wisdom, of compassion. Not the silence of avoidance, but the silence that listens, that holds space, that honors the sacredness of another's pain, without the compulsion to fix, to judge, or to fill the air. Soft piano chord. In the space between words, something beautiful happens. A wounded heart may find the courage to open. A tense situation may soften. A lost soul may remember its worth. And we, the speaker, begin to hear our own heart again. This is the path the sages walked, not because they feared words, but because they revered them. They understood. That speech is the echo of the mind's deepest patterns. And by mastering our words, we untangle our thoughts, calm our emotions, and open the gates to our own awakening. In your lifetime, you will be given tens of thousands of chances to choose your words. Each one is a thread in the tapestry of your karma. Each one shapes the legacy you leave behind. Will your words be remembered as weapons, as wounds, as noise soon forgotten, or will they be remembered as light, as balm, as small quiet acts of mercy in a noisy world? You don't need to save the world with speeches. You don't need to win debates. You don't need to be clever. You need only be kind, steady, gentle, to be the one who speaks less. But when you do, your words matter. They linger like soft rain after a long drought. The Buddha called this right speech, but it might just as easily be called right living, because in the end, our words and our life are the same thing. You speak what you are, and you become what you repeatedly speak. So as we part from this reflection, carry this with you. Let your words be the medicine. Let them be the prayer that others didn't know they needed. Let them be gentle where the world is cruel, steady where it is reckless, truthful where it is deceptive, silent where noise rules. Speak less, mean more. And where you must leave no word, leave peace, because in the end, the legacy you leave behind won't be your possessions, or your titles, or your cleverness. It will be how people felt in your presence, and most of all, what they remembered when you spoke. Thank you for walking this path with me, for listening deeply, for choosing in this brief lifetime to be one who heals, not harms. May your words be few, but may each one be a blessing